Welcome, boys and girls, to our first flipped math lesson. And today's lesson is starting Unit 2 with addition and subtraction. Today we're focusing on two things, and that is understanding the words sum and difference. We're going to be explaining those terms, and we're going to be using some concrete objects. In this case, it'll be some snap cubes. We're making some comparison bar models, and we'll be able to find the sum and difference. Basic, easy problem, 3 plus 5. When you add two numbers, you're finding the sum. So if you didn't know that, those are two things that you need to link together today. When you add, you're finding the sum. The sum of 3 and 5 is 8. Okay, here it tells us to use some snap cubes to show each part and the whole. I'd like to ask you to go ahead and put this video on pause while you get your snap cubes out and go ahead and model this problem. I'm going to switch screens now and get my snap cubes out. Here's my set of 3 and here's my set of 5. Go ahead and put pause while you wait and get your snap cubes together. I've got my snap cubes together, and now I'm ready to go on to the next part. Arrange your blocks like this. Okay, so I've got my blue ones on the top and I've got my red ones on the bottom. There are more blue colored blocks than red. And then there's a question for us. How many more blue colored blocks are there? Well, if you take a look at yours and you can see that, oh, well, I've got 2 more blue. You're finding the difference between two numbers. To find the difference, you subtract. Okay, well, that was one of the objectives of our lesson, was what does the word difference mean and what does the word sum mean? Difference is when you subtract, and to find the sum, you are adding. Okay, now we're going to go just one step harder. We had some snap cubes, but now you need to take out your notebook and do some drawing, and we're drawing to represent those snap cubes that we had before. Okay, before we get too far, let's get ourselves organized. I have my snap cubes here and I have my notebook, and I'm looking at the screen to understand this lesson. Let's go ahead and put the date in our notebook. I think this is a good habit to get into. Today is the 6th of October, 10/6. Okay, and if I look at the screen, it asks me to draw a bar to represent 5 units. Well, remember my snap cubes was 5 units long, and I need to draw a picture of that. The question below it, though, it says, should the bar for 3 be longer or shorter? Well, obviously, if I have a bar for my 3 units, it's going to be shorter. So let's go ahead in our notebook, and I'm using just the lines that are already in my notebook right over the top of those lines to get a nice straight bar. Okay, and that's my bar for 5, and then it asks me to also draw below it a bar for 3. Now, maybe I should take a note here first before I go ahead and draw. It says to make it easy to compare, the bars should be lined up on the left. Well, I'm going to be comparing these snap cubes, and if I'm comparing them, the best thing is to make sure that they both start in the same place, and we're lining those things up on the left, and our bars will be drawn the same way. So when I draw my bar for 3, I'm making it shorter, but I'm also starting on the left hand side, and they're right next to each other, just like my snap cubes. And I know that, well, halfway is probably not long enough, so go a little bit further. Okay. Now, the next thing to do for our drawing is to put a bracket on top here, a little pointer, and that indicates that this is 5. Put the 5 there, and another bracket underneath to indicate how long this bar is, and this is 3. And then I also have another bracket, and if you look at your screen, I've got this bracket over here. We'll get to that in the next step. We were wondering what to do with that bracket, and we can put it in one of two places. And right now, let's say we want to find the difference between 5 and 3, and this section over here indicates the difference, or with our snap cubes, this empty space here indicates the difference between 5 and 3, and so that's where we'll place our bracket. So we'll place a bracket over this empty space, and we can place a question mark there. Now, of course, you know already, since we've solved this one, and you're great mathematicians besides, 5 minus 3, or the difference between 5 and 3 is 2. So you could also have placed a 2 there instead. Oops, let me slide that up. You could have placed a 2 here instead of the question mark. We're going to have and draw that same model using 5 and 3 again. Trace over those lines in your notebook. Here's my bar for 5. Here's my bar for 3. I know it's a little bit, it's less than 5, but a little bit more than halfway. Put my brackets in place. And on this model, I want to show something else. I still have 5 on the top and 3 here, but I want to find how much they are together. So I'm looking at these snap cubes, and I'm wondering how much they are together. So instead of placing the bracket on the bottom like we did in the past, what we do is we place the bracket over here on the side. And for us, that then indicates, okay, how much are these together, or what is the sum if we're adding those? And of course, we know that is 8. And we could have put a question mark there if we didn't know, or we could have also placed the answer there. Let's go on to the next part here. And this one is called a comparison model, when you draw one on top of the other. We're modeling the problem. Now, let's find the difference between 5 and 14. How should we model the problem? Well, we're going to start with those bars. The next question for us is, how long should those bars be? And then we want to label those bars. We also have to write the problem on the bottom, 14 minus 5, and then work out the answer. Now, of course, I know again that you probably know that before we even start, but we're learning a new technique, and it's modeling problems, and we're starting with easy problems to model. So let's go back to our notebook, and we're going to find the difference between 5 and 14 by modeling it with bars. I'm going to go to split screen here so that I can show my notebook at the same time I'm looking at the instructions. Okay, here we go. I've got my notebook now, and I'm ready to start finding the difference between 5 and 14. How long should the bars be? Well, we're going to start with the longer bar first, and that one was 14. And so we're just going to draw a bar. And since it's a new problem, it doesn't have to relate to the one that we just did before it. So even though this is 14 and this one is 5, we don't have to look at this problem. We're just looking now at this new problem, and this is 14. And if I know that half of 14 is 7, 5 is going to be less than that, so I'm going to draw my other bar of 5 less than half of that. It doesn't have to be exact, but somewhere in the ballpark. Also remember that we're lining up those bars on the left-hand side to compare them. We'll label the top bar by drawing a bracket. And this is the bar that's 14. And label the bottom bar with a bracket, and this was the one that was 5. At any point during this video, if you feel like you need more time, just press pause and then you can catch up. The part that we're trying to figure out is this empty space over here, and so we're going to label that one with our question mark. Write the problem, 14 minus 5, and then an equal sign. And then you can go ahead and write your answer in. Let's go on to the next problem. Okay, our next problem is find the sum and difference of 60 and 34, and it tells us to start modeling, or start by modeling the problem. And before we begin drawing, there's a little question for it. It says, should the bar for 60 be longer than the bar for 14 of the previous problem? Well, what they mean by that, and I'm going to just go to my notebook here. This is my previous problem here in my notebook. I had this bar here of 14. And they're wondering now in this new problem if 60 has to be related to this, because 60 would go way off the edge of the page, and the answer to that question is no, this is a different problem. I don't have to worry about the size of this bar. I'm just worrying about a new problem, and I'm going to turn my page just to draw that. Let me just flip back one page just to see what it is we're doing. Oh yes, I'm finding, oh, the sum and the difference on this one. So this problem, we've got two things that we have to try and find out, and it's going to affect how our brackets look. So I'm going to go back to my notebook now, and I'm modeling the sum and the difference of 60. Let's just check that again. 60 and 34. Okay, so let's begin. Draw with me a model for 60, and 60 is a big number. I'll draw a bigger bar than what I had before. I'll label that bracket up here with a 60. And again, you need to pause to take some time to do that. You certainly are welcome. And then let me just check back and see, what was it? Oh, 34 was the other one that I'm modeling. So underneath there, lining it up again on the left side, I'm going to model 34. And I know that 30 is halfway, so just a smidgen more than halfway. And put a bracket under that one. And this one is 34. Now I wanted to model the sum and the difference. Oh, the sum, I'll put the bracket over here. So let's do that one first. I'm modeling the sum, and the question mark goes here. And when I'm modeling for the sum, and I'm going back to my original snap cubes of 5 and 3, when I'm modeling the sum on this right-hand side, I want to know how much there is all together. So that's what this bracket over here represents. So I'll write on the bottom 60 plus 34 and an equal sign, and you can go ahead and answer that one. Let's go ahead and draw the model now for the finding the difference. This first model was finding the sum, and we draw our bracket on the right. Let's model that again, and we'll put a bar for 60 and a bar for 34, which is a little bit more than half. Put the brackets in place. Now this one we want to find the difference, and again going back to my original snap cubes, if I'm looking for difference, it's the space here that's empty. What is the difference between 5 and 3? Well, it's 2, and I subtract 5 minus 3, so I'm looking for this space over here, 60, and I'm taking away or finding the difference 34. So I'll put a question mark right here, and let's write our equation on the bottom. 60 minus 34 equal, and go ahead and write your answer in for that one as well. Next, we'll take a look in our textbook on page 34 and 35, and then we'll take also a look at some tasks where we'll continue to practice drawing a comparison model. I've got our textbook here, so you can just look at your screen. What we'll do is just read through this together. There's a picture of some basketballs on the top. There's 4 here and 7 over there, and the cartoon asks, what is the sum of 4 and 7? And it reminds us to find the sum. We add the two numbers, and down below again it has 4 plus 7, and you know what the sum of that is. The sum of 4 and 7 is, and I'll let you fill in the blank with your answer in your head. Below that, it asks in question B, what is the difference between 4 and 7? And the cartoon again tells us to find the difference, we subtract the smaller number from the bigger one. And here's our equation on the bottom, 7 minus 4. And the difference between the difference between 4 and 7, and I'll let you answer that one also in your head. We're going to go on now to the next pages and work through these together. Here is where you'll need your notebook out, and since this is item number 1, I'll ask you to go ahead and put a 1 on the top of your notebook page so that we know what that one is. Why don't we also put on the top line here, this is page 35. So if we come back to this, we know what it was we were looking at. We have some snap cubes there pictured. There's a picture of 8 yellow snap cubes and 5 blue ones, and it asks us for the sum of 8 and 5. Let's draw a model of that. Here's my model for 8. And underneath that, lining up on the left, I'll draw my model for 5, and I know 5 is a little bit more. Put my brackets in place. This one is 8, and this one is 5. And if we are doing a sum, do you remember where the bracket goes? Are we trying to find this empty spot here, or are we trying to find both of them together? And remember when we talked about sum that we are adding, so we're going to put a bracket over here. And you can go ahead and I'll put in a question mark. You can put in the answer there. And that was letter A, the sum. So over here on the side, let's write letter A, and you can write your answer in there. And then if we look at the next one, letter B in our book says 8 minus 5, and it's asking us for the difference between 8 and 5. And oh, that's this area down here, so place your bracket in there. And you can put the answer in. I'll put in a question mark. And since that's letter B, I'll ask you to put a B over here and then put your answer there as well. At any time during these videos, if you need just a bit more time to draw or to figure out your answers, please push pause and then continue after that. Okay. It looks like now we may be ready for number 2. Number 2, the sum of 90 and 54. Okay. Now we don't have the snap cubes pictured anymore. Now we have a picture of a comparison model using the bars, and let's go ahead and write 2 in our notebook. And we're writing 90. We're drawing a bar for 90. And since this is a new problem, the size of this bar does not have to relate to the size of this one. It only has to go with the one that we're drawing in this problem. So let's put a bracket on this one. This one was 90. We always draw the larger bar on top. And they wanted to find the difference between 90 and 54, and we'll put 54 on the bottom, and that's a little bit more than half. Put a bracket down there. 54. And the difference is this space in here. What is the difference between 90 and 54? And you'll note too here in your textbook the difference is labeled here and the sum is on the side. In letter A, oh, they're asking for us to find the sum. I guess I'll have to put that in over here. So let's go ahead and draw a bracket for the sum first. And that's letter A. I maybe have a little space here on the side, and if you don't, you can put it underneath there too. And go ahead and find the sum of 90 and 54. And let's also figure out this area here. This is the difference, and that would be letter B. Go ahead and label that and place your answer in there. And when you are ready, you can go on to the next problem. Here we go. And our problem is the sum of 12 and 9. So let's start by putting a 3 in our notebook, drawing a bar for 12. That's our larger bar. We'll put that one on top. Label it with a bracket. This is 12, and 9 goes underneath here. And 9 is a bit more than half, so I'll draw that bigger than half and label that one 9. And it tells us, or it asks for a sum, so we'll draw the bracket over here. I'm going to place a question mark in there. You can go ahead and figure out the sum. And since that's letter A in the textbook, I'll draw A or write A and then let you put your answer in there. Letter B says the sum of the two numbers is 21. If one number is 9, the other number is, oh, that's an interesting thought. So if you have the sum over here on the side, which they pretty much told you the answer to, your sum is also the answer in letter A. And now they're asking us, well, if we know this part, then one of the other parts is here. What's the part that remains? And that's your answer for letter B. And again, for B, they told us this part they mention this part and they want you to tell, well, what's the other part that we haven't talked about? That's your answer there. Excuse me, for letter B. Letter C, they're asking us the difference between 21 and 9. And if 21 is the answer for this area here, the sum of these two together, and we know this part, then the other part that we don't know is this part up here, and that would be our answer for C. And then if we look at letter D, they ask us the difference between 21 and 12. Well, if we know this part and this part, then the part that's missing is that one there. Okay, we're going to have you go now to your workbook and fill in the blanks as you go. On page 32 of your workbook, the comparison models have been drawn out. You just have to fill in the blanks. If we go on to the next page, on page 33, there's a note on the top for you to remind yourselves that you must draw the models for each item. Again, I know that you probably can figure out the difference between these or the sums of these numbers without the models, but in these early stages, it's good for us to work with numbers and models that are easy to figure out and easy to understand, so that when we get to harder things, we've already had practice with the easy ones. So you must draw models for each item. So go ahead now to your workbook on page 32 and 33. Good luck.